Some truths don't whisper. They explode like thunder behind a smile, shattering the illusion you were forced to call reality. Chosen one. They thought you'd never find out. They thought the truth could be buried beneath your silence like a coffin sealed shut. But what they didn't realize was that the truth doesn't die. It rots beneath the surface. It leaks. It haunts. And now it's crawling out of the grave they buried it in, with teeth. They didn't just keep secrets. They built an entire reality out of your silence, didn't they? Lied straight to your face, then cried behind your back like you were the monster. Made sure everyone saw them as the victim while you were trying to breathe through the chaos they created. Played innocent while poisoning your name in rooms you didn't even know existed. Didn't they act like the loving one in public while privately gaslighting you to the point you questioned your own memory? They stole your truth, packaged it, sold it as their redemption arc, and painted you as the villain in a story you didn't even write. And now, the truth is about to burn the mask off every one of them. Before we go further, hit that like button and subscribe if this already feels personal, because when you do, it sends a signal to YouTube, to the world, and most importantly, to other chosen ones still stuck in confusion and silence. That it's time to wake up, time to rise, time to remember that the truth always finds its way home. And right now, it's coming back like a wrecking ball. They thought you wouldn't survive without their version of the story. They thought if they erased your side, they could rewrite the ending. But here's the part they never calculated. You weren't waiting for revenge. You were becoming the proof. You see, Chosen One, the dark secret that's about to be exposed. It's not just a story. It's evidence. It's spiritual DNA. It's what they hoped would stay buried forever because it shows what really happened when no one was watching. The moment you stopped defending yourself, that's when the universe stepped in. That's when the reckoning began. You didn't just survive what they did to you, you endured it in silence. The gaslighting, the backhanded compliments, the strategic absence when you needed them most, the way they turned others against you while smiling to your face. And the sickest part? They enjoyed the performance. They loved watching you lose your balance while they stayed clean in public. That was the game. That was the goal. But the truth? Oh, the truth was never theirs to control. They tried to poison your name, convinced others to doubt you, told their version first, so yours would sound like fiction. They made your absence seem like abandonment, your boundaries like betrayal. They twisted your pain into punchlines and your loyalty into leverage. And every time you stayed quiet, they grew louder. But now, silence has turned into pressure. And pressure, it doesn't disappear, it erupts. Something is about to come out, and it's going to dismantle everything they built on your brokenness. This isn't just karma, this is cosmic exposure. The kind that doesn't just ruin reputations, it rewrites destinies. What you didn't know was that the very thing they were hiding from you was your proof, that family secret, that conversation you were never meant to hear, that confession that slipped out from someone they never thought would talk, that missing puzzle piece that changes everything. It's all coming. And when it does, it won't just justify your pain, it will reveal their sickness. You didn't imagine it. You weren't paranoid. You weren't too sensitive. You were being spiritually prepared to carry a truth that would shatter illusions. You weren't the problem. You were the prophecy, the presence that made their lies sweat. That's why they turned on you. That's why they tried to control the narrative. Because the moment you speak, their entire story becomes fiction. Chosen One, this is the moment they feared most. You remembering who you are and what really happened. You standing in clarity, not revenge, not anger, just truth. Cold, undeniable, and burning through every lie like a blade through silk. And let's be real, you always knew something wasn't right. The energy never matched the words. The smiles always felt staged. The silence after your boundaries. That was never peace. It was punishment. And now, the universe is tired of waiting. You're about to witness a shift. The kind of shift that turns confusion into confirmation. That makes the silent ones speak. That flips the script so hard the actors start choking on their lines. So don't be surprised when that phone call comes, when that secret slips, when that mask falls. It's all divine timing. They couldn't silence your truth forever because truth doesn't need a microphone. It just needs the right moment. And that moment is now. This isn't just a chapter, it's the reveal. The scene they tried to cut from your story. And guess what? You were never the extra, you were the plot twist. And listen closely, Chosen One. Don't go anywhere, because that was just the knock at the door, the real storm. It's about to blow the roof off. What you're about to hear isn't just truth. It's the kind of truth that changes you. So if your bones are already buzzing, if your spirit feels called out, drop the number 77 in the comments to let the world know you see it now. And if this message is striking your soul, consider hitting that super thanks, because your support helps this truth echo louder for the other chosen ones still trapped in silence. And now, let's dive in step by step. Because if you really are who the universe says you are, this won't just interest you, it'll grip you, it'll validate every scar. And by the end, you won't just understand what they did, you'll know exactly why they did it. Let's get into it. Number 1, you felt the shift before it happened. They felt you were getting too quiet. And that's when they panicked, because only fools think silence means surrender. But the real ones know. Silence is what it sounds like before the ground splits open. They knew something was shifting in you. That's why they tightened their grip right before it slipped. You felt it, didn't you? That strange tension in the air, the uneasiness that didn't make sense, but wouldn't leave. The energy didn't feel clean, like walking into a room where everyone's smiling, but the walls are sweating with secrets. You couldn't put your finger on it, but your spirit knew. Something was off. Something was being hidden. And now, Chosen One, that something is about to erupt. See, they thought they could keep playing you, that they could wear the mask a little longer and keep the illusion alive. But what they didn't know is, the chosen feel the shift before it ever reaches the surface. We don't wait for proof. We feel the pressure building in the atmosphere before the storm ever hits. And that uneasiness you've been carrying, that wasn't anxiety. That was prophetic awareness. That was your spirit sensing the collapse before the first brick fell. They tried to convince you it was all in your head, didn't they? Tried to laugh it off, gaslight you, throw distractions in your path, get loud with their stories and vague with their actions. But deep down, you already knew. You just didn't have the receipts? Not yet. Let's make something clear. They weren't scared of losing you. They were scared of you waking up. Because once you stop doubting your intuition, their lies lose their power, and that's what they feared most. You were never confused. You were being spiritually alerted. And let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about why the chosen ones always feel the shift before the rest of the world catches up. It's because you were never meant to play a supporting role in their little show. You were never designed to blend in, go along and smile politely while your soul screamed for answers. No, you were built different. built like Moses, who felt the pressure before the sea parted, like Joan of Arc, who felt the fire in her bones before they ever lit the match, like Malcolm, like Nina, like Jesus at the table, looking at Judas with full knowledge and still choosing silence, because some truths don't need to be spoken. They just need to be revealed. So when you felt the energy shift last week, when you felt that emotional pressure rising like a wave, that wasn't weakness. That was alignment. That was your soul screaming, "Brace yourself. The truth is about to surface." And the enemy knew it too. That's why they started acting strange. That's why they tried to distract you, draw you back in, play nice again. They could feel the energy around you tightening. The universe was pulling you out of the fog. You were no longer vibrating at their level, and that terrified them. Because your clarity, it's fatal to their illusion. They thrive in confusion. They depend on it. They twist half-truths into full stories and dangle guilt over your head like a leash. But clarity, real clarity, that breaks every chain. And you were starting to see too much. You were starting to ask the right questions. You were starting to notice how often they avoided the truth, changed the subject, got defensive when there was nothing to defend. That's not paranoia, that's discernment. You don't owe anyone an apology for waking up. Chosen one, I know you've questioned yourself. I know you've replayed conversations in your head, wondering if you were being too sensitive, too suspicious, too emotional. But let me set you free. You weren't overthinking. You were underestimating how well they lie. They don't feel guilt the way you do. They feel fear of being exposed. That's why the vibe shifted before the facts did, because your energy caught the lie before your mind had the proof. That's the gift of being chosen. It's not comfort. It's not convenience. It's a radar, a divine download. And they hated that about you. They hated that you could feel things they were trying so hard to hide, that you were built to see through the fog they spent years constructing. And just like any manipulator, they did what all cowards do when truth gets too close. They tried to twist it back on you. Why are you acting different? You're just being dramatic. Don't you trust me? Translation: you're too close to the truth, and I need to scramble your clarity before you see too much. But guess what? You saw it anyway. You saw it in their energy before they even opened their mouth. You felt it in the sudden silence, in the way conversations started feeling tight, in the way they'd talk too much but say nothing real. You caught the pause before the lie, the over-explaining, the defensiveness, the way their spirit tensed up when you got too close to the part they wanted to hide. That's the difference between you and them. You don't need the mask to fall. You already see the cracks. So if you've been walking around this week feeling like you're losing your grip, like something is coming but you can't name it, you're not crazy. You're tuned in, and what's coming isn't your breakdown. It's their exposure. This is why the universe chooses people like you. Not because you're perfect, not because you're always right, but because you're willing to listen to what others ignore. You feel what they pretend doesn't exist. You carry the burden of knowing something is off long before anyone else does. And yes, it's exhausting, but it's also your armor, because now that truth is surfacing, you're not caught off guard. You're not scrambling for answers. You're sitting in clarity, watching the story collapse, just like you knew it would. So remember this, the shift wasn't just in your life, it was in your soul. You didn't change because of what they did. You changed because you finally stopped pretending you didn't feel what you felt. And now that feeling has a name, that energy has a face, that lie has a timestamp. They thought your silence meant confusion. It didn't. It meant the storm was gathering. And now the winds are here. The truth is rising, and you, chosen one, are standing exactly where you're meant to be, centered, awakened, and ready, because when the illusion shatters, only the real ones remain. Number 2. The silent bond was a lie. They didn't bond with you. They studied you, mirrored you, fed off your warmth like thieves smiling in your reflection. But now, the mirror is cracking, and what's underneath is ugly. They called it connection. But deep down, something never sat right. You told yourself it was just your trust issues talking. You tried to believe in the comfort, the chemistry, the synchronicities, the silent understanding. But the silence was never peace. It was performance. It was strategy. And that unspoken bond, that wasn't mutual energy. That was you projecting realness onto a role they were playing. They didn't love your soul. They mimicked your glow. And now the mask is slipping. Chosen one, it's time to stop romanticizing what was always a setup. They didn't connect with your spirit because they felt safe. They connected with your light because it gave them cover. You were the safe space. You were the grounding wire. You were the stable frequency they clung to, because they knew that left on their own, their true self couldn't survive under direct truth. They didn't love the real you. They loved the version of you that gave them access without exposure. Didn't you ever notice how they were always just in tune enough to keep you close, but never deep enough to let you all the way in? How they matched your energy but never initiated it? How they echoed your vulnerability but never shared any of their own without force? That's not intimacy, that's imitation. And that's the twisted part. They didn't want your connection. They wanted your power source. And they disguised dependency as emotional alignment. It's the oldest trick in the book. Mimic the chosen to gain their trust, then slowly siphon their essence until they forget their own reflection. You were the mirror, and they stood in front of you pretending to shine. You shared your soul. They copied your rhythm. You opened your spirit. They rehearsed their reactions. And the sickest part? They did it while convincing you that you were the one who needed them. But here's what they didn't calculate. Mirrors eventually reflect more than light. They revealed shadows. And now that the energy is shifting, they can't keep up. You've outgrown their mask. You've evolved past the version of you they were able to manipulate. Because let's be honest, back then, you wanted to believe it was real. You held on to the little signs, the chemistry, the deep convos, the weird synchronicities that felt like fate. But now you see it for what it was: spiritual camouflage. They matched your frequency just enough to blend in, until you started to awaken. And the moment you stopped dimming yourself to protect their fragility, that's when the tension began. They started pulling back, acting confused, making you feel crazy, gaslighting your instincts like they weren't the ones who triggered them. Because real connection doesn't shrink when you grow, it expands. But they weren't growing with you, they were hiding inside you. And let's call it what it was. They used your love to avoid their own healing. You became their emotional crutch, their identity coat. They wore you like armor in public, just to survive the parts of themselves they refused to face in private. And what about you? You started asking, did I do something wrong? Did I change? Did I imagine all of it? No. You didn't imagine the bond. You just mistook mimicry for meaning. You didn't change. You remembered. And once a chosen one remembers their power, they can't unsee the frauds around them. This is why the mask is falling. Because you stopped giving them the script. You stopped feeding them the lines. You stopped leading them with your light. And now their movements feel robotic. Their words feel empty. Their presence feels hollow. because without your essence, they have no identity left to fake. You were the heartbeat of the connection, and they were just echoing your rhythm. And now the universe is exposing the lie. You might be feeling guilt right now, confusion, that lingering ache in your chest that says, "But what if some of it was real?" Let me give you the hard answer. The only real thing in that connection was you. The energy was real because you made it real. The depth was real because you dug it. They just swam in the pool you built and called it destiny. That's why they stayed just close enough to feed, but never close enough to be revealed. That's why they loved to be seen with you, but always changed when you needed to be seen yourself. That's why they said, "I got you," and never did. That's why they called you too intense the moment your intuition came too close to their hidden truth. Because they never wanted connection, they wanted cover. And what happens when a chosen one removes their energy from a counterfeit bond? The illusion falls flat, the sparkle fades, the temperature drops, and suddenly the whole world sees them for what they are, an actor with no lines left. Don't let the nostalgia confuse you. Don't let the silence trick you into thinking they miss you. They don't miss you. They miss who they got to be when you were around. You made them feel powerful, relevant, aligned. But now that you're gone, all that's left is their reflection, and they can't stand what they see. Let this sink deep. It wasn't a bond. It was a disguise. And now the mask is slipping. And you're rising, unbothered. Because when you stop giving people mirrors to fake themselves in, they have no choice but to meet their own shadows. And most of them aren't ready. They'll say you switched up, that you got cold, that you ghosted. But what really happened was spiritual detox. The divine pulled you away to preserve your purpose, and now they're choking on the quiet that used to keep them safe. Don't chase closure. Don't reach back for validation. You were never the fake one. You were the reason the connection even felt real in the first place. They borrowed your depth, paraded around in your energy, and hoped you'd never notice they had none of their own. But you did notice, and that noticing, that was your rebirth. You saw through the costume. You walked out of the performance, you left the stage, and now they're standing there, lines forgotten, script gone, spotlight fading. Because you were never part of their illusion. You were the truth they couldn't keep pretending against. Number 3, they tried to erase you, now their truth is leaking. They didn't just lie behind your back, they danced on your silence like it was a stage, built a parade out of your pain, hoping no one would ever ask why the music sounded off. Chosen one, they didn't just try to forget you, they tried to delete you from conversations, from circles, from your own story. They rewrote the narrative with themselves as the victim and you as the villain. Didn't they? They didn't stop at betrayal. They got creative with it, made sure your name tasted bitter on other people's tongues before you even got a chance to speak. But here's the truth. Your silence wasn't weakness. It was the universe pulling receipts. While they were building social circles on your name, burning sage to clear guilt they refused to own, the truth was boiling underground. And now, the pressure's too much. It's leaking, slipping through their forced smiles and half-hearted healing quotes. Every fake story they told is starting to crack. Every version of the events they twisted is unraveling, and they can feel it. They're watching your name come up again, this time without shame. They're hearing people say, "Wait, that doesn't add up." The same people who once believed the lie are now noticing the gaps, the pauses, the over-explaining. Because that's the thing about the truth. You can't bury it when the one you buried was planted. Chosen one, the universe saw everything, and it didn't forget. You didn't have to clap back. You didn't have to defend yourself to the crowd. You didn't need revenge. All you needed was time, and time has a way of making masks fall. And now the gossipers, the manipulators, the ones who couldn't keep your name out their mouth, they're panicking because every time your name is mentioned now, the energy shifts. People are starting to feel that they were fed a lie. The very foundation they built their fake peace on. It's trembling, and it's only a matter of time before it crumbles. Look at history. Look at Malcolm X. They called him too angry, too loud, too much. But the truth he carried outlived every bullet they tried to silence him with. Look at Frida Kahlo, discarded, misunderstood, painted as unstable. But her pain became a movement, and her truth, immortal. The chosen never stay erased. They become the echo that breaks through centuries. So stop wondering if it was you. Stop asking if you were too intense, too sensitive, too reactive. You weren't too anything. You were too real for people who depended on illusion to survive. And now the truth is returning like fire. It's not here to ask permission. It's here to burn away every lie they built on your back. So stand tall, watch them squirm. You don't need to say a word. The truth is already speaking for you. Number 4. The revelation that shattered the spell. They didn't hide the truth from the world. They hid it from you, because once you connected the dots, you'd realize the entire spell was built on your silence and their lies. Chosen one. Do you remember that moment? That one piece of information that landed like a punch to the soul? That flash of truth that didn't just sting, it ripped the blindfold off. Maybe it came in a dream, a slip of the tongue, a strange coincidence that connected dots you didn't even know were related. But when it hit, everything changed. You weren't crazy, you were early. That gut feeling you kept silencing, that wasn't paranoia. That was prophetic timing. They didn't expect you to put it all together. That's why they worked so hard to keep you distracted. They over-explained, over-apologized, played the victim, shifted blame. But deep down, they knew. If you ever caught one thread and pulled, the whole thing would unravel. And now it has. That one truth. That was your divine download, and you didn't just receive it, you recognized it, because deep in your spirit, you already knew. That's why you always felt uneasy. That's why the smiles never matched the energy. That's why you kept waking up with that weight on your chest, wondering why you couldn't breathe around certain people. Because they were casting spells with their lies, and hoping you'd never break the trance. But the illusion's dead now. That single revelation shattered everything. The fake friendships, the pretend peace, the I love yous that came with daggers hidden underneath. You saw their true face, not the mask they wore for the world, but the one they hid from themselves. And you didn't just see it. You felt it, in your chest, in your bones, in the silence that followed. That's what the enemy never understood, that the chosen don't need receipts. We feel what's real. And once we know, we can't unknow. Once we see, we can't unsee. And once the spell breaks, so does their control. Remember when Harriet Tubman said, "I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves." That's you, chosen one. You broke out of a spell they told you was love, loyalty, family, soulmate. But it was control. And now you see it clearly. Let it hurt. Let it sting. Let the illusion collapse. Because every piece that breaks sets you free from the version of yourself that was built to tolerate the lie. The truth didn't destroy you. It delivered you. This was the moment they feared the most. You, awake. You, unapologetic. You, clear. And now, the spell is broken, and you're never going back. Number 5. This was spiritual warfare in disguise. You weren't unstable. You were exhausted from carrying people who mistook your strength for softness and your silence for surrender. You weren't broken. You were parenting the ones who wounded you, while they pointed at your healing and called it drama. Chosen one, this wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't just a toxic relationship. This was spiritual warfare disguised as love, loyalty, and blood. The battlefield wasn't a physical one. It was psychological, emotional, ancestral. They weren't just messing with your head. They were messing with your soul. They came wrapped in titles: mother, brother, partner, best friend. They wore the mask of closeness, said things like, "I'm just trying to help," while subtly shattering your self-worth, said, "I love you," while weaponizing your empathy. And you kept showing up. You kept forgiving. You kept thinking if you just loved harder, explained deeper, stayed longer, they'd finally understand you, appreciate you, protect you. But they weren't confused. They were strategic. Because the real ones don't drain you. They don't leave you second-guessing your worth. They don't twist your kindness into leverage. And what you were dealing with wasn't confusion. It was spiritual sabotage. You were parenting people who should have protected you, coaching people who had no intention of growing, holding emotional space for people who only stepped into your light to cast a longer shadow. They called you unstable, but let's tell the truth, they were projecting. You were the emotional adult in a house full of wounded children in grown bodies. You were the one they leaned on, unloaded on, blamed, and still expected you to smile through the bleeding. They didn't love you. They leaned on you, used your healing as their hiding place. And when you started setting boundaries, when your energy shifted, suddenly, you were the problem. No, chosen one, you weren't the problem. You were the threat to their spiritual stagnation. You were evolving, and that's why they lashed out. Look at people like Maya Angelou, who stood in the fire of trauma and betrayal, and still spoke with clarity and grace. She was called too deep, too intense, too much. But that's what the world calls those who rise above the system that tried to cage them. And now, look at you, still standing, still glowing, still carrying grace in the same hands that were once shaking from betrayal. That wasn't love, that wasn't family, that wasn't loyalty, that was spiritual warfare. And you didn't just survive it, you won. Number 6. They only told half the story because the whole one would expose them. They told their story like a highlight reel, but left out the part where they dropped the camera, faked the scenes, and edited you out like the pain they caused was just a glitch in the timeline. They gave the world the trailer, while you lived through the deleted scenes. Chosen one, they only told their half, the polished half. The curated version designed for pity and applause, the kind that sounds just tragic enough to make them the victim, but never real enough to reveal the truth. And you? You weren't just left out. You were erased. They didn't lie. No, they're more cunning than that. They told partial truths, weaponized context, said things like, "We just grew apart," while leaving out how they gutted your trust and smiled doing it. Said, "They're just too emotional," while skipping the part where they triggered every wound, then denied it happened. They're the type to throw the rock, hide their hand, then say, "I was just defending myself." But here's the part that nearly broke you. People believed them. Because half a story, when told with confidence, sounds like gospel to the unhealed. And the world, it loves a clean narrative. It's easier to digest the version where you're the drama, the difficult one, the too much. Because to believe your side, they'd have to admit they missed something, that they supported someone who was wearing a mask. And you felt that, didn't you? That invisible hand over your mouth, that pressure to stay quiet, to be the bigger person. But while you were bleeding in silence, they were building sympathy campaigns with your blood. That's what gaslighting does. It doesn't just confuse you, it dismantles your grip on reality. You start to wonder if you really did overreact. If maybe you were the toxic one. You replay conversations, dissect your own emotions, apologize for things you never did, just to keep the peace. But that peace, that was just their comfort zone, built on your compliance. They weren't confused, they were protecting the illusion. Because if people ever heard the whole story, if the full truth came out, the manipulation, the lies, the subtle jabs, the hidden agenda, they wouldn't look like survivors. They'd look like architects of destruction. This is what cowards do. They turn down your volume so their version is the only one heard. But not anymore. The universe is tired of their highlight reel. It's flipping the script. And when the truth speaks, it doesn't whisper, it roars. You don't need to defend yourself. The truth will. And when it does, they'll finally be seen. Not as victims, but as the villains they hoped no one would notice. Number 7. You chose peace, and that's what made you powerful. They kept throwing fire, hoping you'd burn with them, but instead you walked through the flames like it was just weather, and that's when they realized silence isn't surrender, it's strength with teeth. Chosen one, they were testing you the whole time, poking, prodding, pushing buttons like it was a game, waiting for you to snap, to swing, to collapse under the weight of your own restraint. They wanted you to scream so they could say, "See? That's the real you." They were baiting the beast, praying for a breakdown. But you didn't give them one. You gave them peace. Not the soft kind, the divine kind, the kind forged in isolation, anchored in spirit, and sharpened through betrayal. That's what they couldn't predict, that while they were out there playing chess with your name, you were in here building an empire out of silence. They weren't ready for you to stay calm. They weren't ready for you to not react. They weren't ready for you to choose evolution over ego. You didn't choose peace because you were weak. You chose it because you were done bleeding for people who wouldn't even hand you a band-aid. And now they're angry, confused, frustrated. Why? Because they expected a war, and you gave them a funeral for the version of you they used to manipulate. That's the thing about real growth. It's quiet. It doesn't post a warning. It doesn't shout in the street. It just moves different. And when you stopped explaining yourself, when you stopped replying, defending, proving, that's when your energy shifted and their mask started to melt. They weren't expecting you to heal. They were counting on your pain to keep you attached. They needed you angry, reactive, chasing closure. But you gave them detachment. You gave them distance. You gave them nothing. And that nothing, that silence, that calm, it shook their soul. Because people expect the chosen ones to fight back. What they don't expect is for us to ascend. They forget that peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the refusal to dance with chaos. And that's what you did. You stopped attending the circus. You stepped off the battlefield they built and walked straight into divine alignment. You passed the test not by clapping back, but by not lowering your frequency to answer a question you've already outgrown. Look at Michelle Obama. When they go low, we go high. Not because she couldn't drag them, but because royalty doesn't roll in the dirt. You, Chosen One, are built the same. You didn't win by fighting, you won by not needing to. And that's what makes you untouchable. Number 8. You've outgrown what was sent to break you. They stayed petty, you became power, and now they're choking on the silence where your pain used to live. Chosen One, they didn't just underestimate you, they bet everything on your downfall. They thought the betrayal would break you, that the lies, the silence, the twisted narrative would leave you clinging for validation. But instead of collapsing, you leveled up, quietly, relentlessly. While they stayed stuck in petty cycles and recycled drama, you stepped out of the storm and into your strength. What they sent to destroy you became the very thing that revealed who you truly are. You see, they counted on your reaction. They needed it. They needed the chaos, the confrontation, the spectacle, but you gave them stillness. You gave them distance. You gave them exactly what they never expected: growth. You didn't just walk away, you walked up, and that terrified them more than any response ever could. You weren't created to shrink, you were made to evolve, and now you've outgrown their games, their manipulation, their performative loyalty, the love that came with strings, the support that disappeared the moment you needed it, the friendship that only worked when you stayed small enough to make them feel big. They weren't losing you, they were losing access to the version of you that tolerated nonsense. They were losing their seat in a story that no longer revolves around their chaos. Because every time they tried to pull you back into the cycle, you were already 3 steps ahead, growing, healing, transforming in silence. You matured past their reach, and now they're stuck with the version of themselves that only ever knew how to control, not connect, to compete, not care. And let's not pretend it didn't hurt. You grieved people who were still alive. You cried over rooms you were pushed out of, even though you never belonged there. But in that grief, something clicked. You weren't meant to fit into spaces built on dysfunction. You weren't the broken one. You were the one outgrowing the mess. Look at people like Taraji P. Henson. She walked away from relationships, roles, even environments that didn't value her, and came back stronger, clearer, unshakable. That's you now. You're not bitter, you're better. You're not colder, you're clearer. You're not heartless, you're healed. They stayed petty, repeating the same behaviors, the same excuses, the same games. But you became a version of yourself they can't fake, can't reach, and can't replace. You've outgrown what was sent to break you. And now, you're finally free. Number 9. They couldn't handle your light, so they tried to dim it. You found your voice, and they called it attitude, found your truth, and they called it ego. But the truth is, they weren't offended by your tone. They were terrified that you no longer needed their permission to exist. Chosen One, they couldn't handle your light. So they did what insecure people always do when real energy enters the room. They tried to shrink it, mask it, twist it. They called you too much, too intense, too sensitive. But the real issue wasn't that you were too much. The real issue was they couldn't manipulate you anymore once you saw yourself clearly. You didn't suddenly change. You didn't become difficult. You simply stopped shrinking to make them comfortable. And that's when their smiles started slipping. That's when the subtle jabs started coming. That's when the conversation shifted from "I'm proud of you" to "You've changed." Because you did change. You grew. You healed. You set boundaries. And in their world, boundaries are betrayal. You found your voice, and they mistook it for rebellion. You stopped asking for validation, and they called it arrogance. You stopped over-explaining your worth, and they called it attitude. But the truth? Your soul woke up, And when a soul finally wakes up, it stops begging to be understood by people who only ever loved your silence. They couldn't handle your light because it forced them to confront their own darkness. Your clarity made their confusion uncomfortable. Your confidence made their control crumble. They didn't want you confident. They wanted you compliant. The version of you that said yes to everything, that over-apologized, that overextended, that over-explained. The version that made their mediocrity feel like mastery. But now, that version is gone. Now you say no and mean it. Now you ask questions that shake their lies. Now you stand in rooms and don't flinch. And they hate that, because once your light is turned all the way on, the people who only ever thrived in your shadow can't survive in your presence. Look at someone like Serena Williams, dominant, powerful, clear, and every time she set boundaries, they called her angry, aggressive, difficult, but what she really was, free. And the world has always had a problem with free women who know their power. Same with you. You didn't dim your light. They just never expected you to stop handing them the switch. So let them talk. Let them call it what they want. Their labels are not your truth. Their discomfort is not your burden. You weren't made to be manageable. You were made to be authentic. And now that you've stopped dimming yourself to be digestible, they're choking on the brightness. And that's not your problem. It's their karma. Number 10. Love is entering because you finally chose you. You gave up on love, not because you stopped believing in it, but because you got tired of watering deserts and calling it a garden. And the moment you walked away from everything false, real love started looking for you. Chosen one, you weren't closed off, you were exhausted. Tired of explaining your heart to people who only wanted to borrow it. Tired of confusing emotional chaos with passion. Tired of being loyal to souls who were only loyal to their convenience. You weren't bitter. You were just done. Done with the pretending. Done with the potential. Done with performing for people who couldn't meet you at your level. And when you finally let it all go, not with rage, but with clarity, the energy shifted. Because that's how the universe works. Love doesn't enter when we're chasing it. Love shows up when we choose ourselves, fully, unapologetically, finally. And now that you've cleared the room of everything fake, everything manipulative, everything rooted in ego, something real is coming in. Something grounded, something stable, something that doesn't shake when you speak your truth. Because the truth is, you were never too much. They just didn't have the depth to meet you. Now that you've stopped settling for crumbs, the feast is being prepared. This new energy, it's not chaotic, it's not confusing, it doesn't make you question your worth or your place in someone's life. It arrives with intention. It's not here to fix you, it's here to match you. And yes, it'll surprise you. It'll feel unfamiliar at first because you're used to struggling for affection. But this won't be a test. It'll be a confirmation, a reflection of all the work you've done, all the tears, all the boundaries, all the healing in silence while others laughed and doubted. Because now that you've chosen peace, peace is choosing you back. Now that you've become the safe space for yourself, someone is being drawn into your life who's built the same way. And it won't be about saving each other. It'll be about building together. No manipulation, no confusion, just alignment. Look at someone like Viola Davis. She stopped chasing validation, owned her journey, stood in her truth. And what did she attract? A love that sees her and celebrates her. That's not fantasy. That's what happens when you finally choose you. And you're there now. The universe watched you walk away from what was hurting you. It saw you cry, stand, and rebuild in silence. And now it's rewarding your courage with what you stopped waiting for, but never stopped deserving. So don't second-guess it. Don't push it away when it shows up. You're not dreaming this time. Love is entering. Abundance is arriving, not because you begged for it, but because you became it. And now the energy you thought didn't exist is finally here. And now, chosen one, the message is clear. Everything they tried to bury is blooming. The truth is out. The spell is broken. And what once felt like punishment was really preparation. You didn't just survive. You transformed. You reclaimed your voice, your power, your peace. And now, love and abundance are answering back. So if this message hit your soul like truth, drop the number 77 in the comments to confirm it. Like this video to fuel the algorithm, subscribe to join the chosen ones rising worldwide, and share this with someone who needs to remember who they are. We're not done, we're just beginning.